you very much for logging on to this Zoom video conference meeting of the Economic and Environmental Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee. My name is John Turner. I'm the Democratic Services Officer for the meeting, and I'm assisted by my colleague, Kate Sheldon, who is the host of the meeting. Members are now familiar with the operation of these Zoom meetings, but just a quick reminder, we ask you to stay on mute whilst you're not speaking. If you wish to speak, just raise your hand. As so, the chair will note it and ask you to come in when appropriate. And if you can then put yourselves back on mute afterwards. The meeting is a public meeting and will be held in alignment with the new regulations which permit meetings to be held by remote means and will be live streamed for the public to view. One further thing for the members of the public, you may see members and officers looking to their right or left of the screen. They're not being distracted in any way. They're simply looking at paperwork on other devices. I'll now hand you over to the chair of the meeting, Councillor Denise Fox.
Thank you, John. Welcome, everybody. It's nice to see you all. I'm now going to ask you to introduce yourself as I see you on my screen. John's introducing himself. Kate.
Hello, I'm Kate Sheldon, Member Support.
Thank you, Kate. Councillor Hooper.
Councillor Alan Hooper, Councillor of West Ecclesfield.
Thank you. Councillor Masters.
Councillor Barbara Masters, Councillor for Ecclesfield.
Councillor Lodge.
Councillor Brian Lodge, Member for Burley Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
Councillor Neil Gibson, Councillor for Walkley.
Councillor Richards. You're muted.
Councillor Shonadmeyer Richards, Member for Manor and Castle Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Turpin.
Councillor Paul Turpin, Green Party Member for Bleedless Valley.
Thank you. Councillor Oakland.
Councillor Ian Auckland, Member for Graves Park Ward.
Thank you. Deborah.
Am I muted? Sorry, hang on.
You're fine.
Deborah Glenn, Policy Officer to support this committee.
Thank you. Councillor Miskell.
Councillor Ben Miskell for Park and Arbourthorne Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Fox.
Councillor Terry Fox, I'm the Cabinet Member for Finance, Resources and Governance, and also Deputy Leader. Chair, I'm getting some feedback from Kate. Can you ask Kate to?
Yeah, she can't. You mute everything. She says, oh, she's muted it now. Okay, thank you, Ryan.
Thanks, Chair. I'm Ryan Keyworth. I'm the Council's Director of Finance and Commercial Services.
Thank you, Lisa.
Hi, I'm Lisa Firth. I'm the Council's Director for Culture, which includes Parks and Leisure as well.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, Martin Smith, Councillor for Durham Totley.
Thank you. Councillor Cahoon.
Hello, Councillor Abdul Qayyum, Councillor for Firth Park.
Thank you. Councillor Hurst.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Diane Hurst. I'm Councillor for Richmond Ward.
Thank you. Eugene.
Eugene Walker, Executive Director of Resources.
Thank you. Councillor O'Rourke.
Hi, Councillor Maya O'Rourke, East Ecclesfield.
Thank you very much, everyone, and welcome to the public today. I have got some questions which we'll get to later. But item 2 on the agenda is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies today?
I've not received any apologies, Chair.
Chair, obviously, I think Councillor Maroof can't get in. at the minute. So I think they would proceed if somebody can't get in on the basis.
I think we have to. They'll probably join us at some stage. I think that's the way that we have to do it, I'm afraid.
And
Is that right, John?
Yes, sorry, Chair. Yeah, I mean, obviously, if he can't get in full stop for the whole meeting, I will record his apologies, obviously.
And Mr. Biggin, who got one of the questions, he's put a chat on saying he can't get in, so he can't see if he's on. Don't know if that's something technical,
Right.
Kate.
He's probably in the waiting room.
Yeah.
I'm sure Kate will be sorting that out. Yeah. Have we got Mr. Biggins, Kate?
I have, yes.
Yes.
He's in the meeting room.
So he'll be called in a few minutes when it's his turn, Ian. Yeah.
I'm just in the process of responding to him.
Thank you, John. And we've got Mary joining us, but
yeah, sorry about.
But we have got Councillor Terry Fox on your screen, Councillor.
Oh, that's because I didn't have a link, and he's had to send me a link. So I'm Terry Fox as well today, sort of. Thanks anyway, and apologies for being late.
Mary, you can change your name if you want to, if it's going to cause confusion for people. Yeah. Top right hand corner, there's 3 dots.
Yeah.
Of your little box.
Yeah.
Have you found it? Change name, yeah.
Change name.
If you click on the 3 little dots, oh, hang on.
Yeah, I've clicked on the 3 little dots, and then we'll go to my picture.
Sorry, I can't.
It's all right. Oh yes, it's changed it, Mary.
Oh, it's Mary Les.
We've got Mary Les.
That'll do.
Yeah, it'll do. Okay. Thank you very much. Item 3, exclusion of public and press. We've got no exclusion today. I am aware that Sheffield Live will be streaming us as well today. They have informed me previously. Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest? Item 4. No, nobody's indicating to me. That's fine. Item 5 is minutes of the previous meeting. I know it was a long time ago, but if you turn to your pages, page 9, it starts with the minutes of the previous meeting. Can I, for accuracy first, can we have an agreement that these are, to your recollection, as accurate? Yes, no, we've got Councillor Turpin. Is this for accuracy or a matter? Sorry, I get that. Is it for accuracy about minutes, or is it something you want to raise about the minutes?
I think I'll just raise it about the minutes. A member of the public who asked a question contacted me and questioned the accuracy. I contacted Jason and I think I sent it to you, didn't I, John? To look into, yeah. So I don't think I need to raise it now. Personally, it was that long ago, I can't really remember it, and the webcast archive has gone. So I'll just wait for John to get back to me. I just thought I'd better raise it during the during this meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Turpin. John?
Yeah, can I just say a few words about that, Councillor Turpin? I have actually managed to get hold of the minute book that that meeting was in, and I'm 100% sure that Edward Highfield was at the meeting, because if you look at the next item down, he actually makes the presentation. The member of the public was claiming he wasn't even there. So, I have tried to contact Mr. Highfield, but the email system's been down. But the minutes accurately reflect my notes, so I'm happy with.
Thanks, John.
Okay. Thank you.
Denise.
Is there? Right, we'll go back then, because Councillor Turpin interrupted. Can we all agree that these are accurate minutes? Yep. I mean, can we have some nods? Yes, thank you. Do we have any matters arising from the minutes? Councillor Smith?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's with regards to item 4.1. and this is the extra information that the committee requested from the City Trust following our discussion of that pretty awful audit report we had back in October. So my question is, the council was due to get further information and the final report in October last year. I'm just wondering, did that happen?
I could help if that would be helpful, Chair.
Sorry, I'm confused here. You're saying this meeting we had was in March?
That's correct.
Right,
And
yeah.
in the minutes, item 4.1,
yeah,
we were asking about the availability of information. It wasn't available, so I'm just asking again, did the City Trust provide that information?
Okay, yeah. Lisa?
Okay, so I think the last report that we provided to the scrutiny meeting was in October 2019, and we were asked for another report to come back in March 2020, and the meeting was cancelled because we went into lockdown. And so that further report, I think that Councillor Smith is referring to, was never presented to scrutiny because the meeting was cancelled. So, sorry, go on, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I appreciate and accept that. That wasn't quite my question.
Okay.
The question was, did the City Trust provide the information to the council? They were due to provide that at the end of October last year.
Yes.
And I'm just questioning whether the
Yes.
council had that information.
Yes, and since October last year, which I think we'll probably come on to as well, we've had an awful lot more information from the City Trust as well. And some of the information that that we were going to provide in March has also been incorporated into the report for today as well. So yes, we've had further information from the City Trust, and we've also had more since then as well, to get us to today. But if there's specifics that are outstanding, I'm sorry, I don't have the specific detail in front of me, but if is there anything outstanding, then we can make sure we provide that for the record.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Is there any other matters? Does anybody want to raise any other matters from previous meetings? No, so we can move on. Thank you very much. Hey, can you mute? Kate, can you mute your screen? Can you mute, please? Thank you. Right, I've been asked now by Councillor Lee if she can make a statement, and it will reflect on the questions that are going to be answered. So, Councillor Lee.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Fox. That's very kind of you. I just want to say that obviously there's been a lot of discussion about Ponds Forge, both within the council and outside of the council over recent weeks after the opening of the rest of the facilities. And it's something that we have discussed as a cabinet on numerous occasions over the last few weeks. We met today as a cabinet with our officers, where it was, again, we had a further discussion, and we asked officers to bring forward a report to the September cabinet with plans on reopening Ponds Forge. As I said, we've continued to review all these decisions that were made, and particular Ponds Forge over recent weeks since the other sporting venues opened. So that's we've asked officers to bring back a report also with the additional funding that we need to reopen that particular facility. So I'm very pleased that we've been able to do that today. It's the Ponds Forge is an icon in the city. It's an iconic building. It's got a long history of sporting excellence certainly in diving and swimming and water polo. We know that those sports have lobbied us and have tried looking at how they can help us fund the reopening of Ponds Forge, and I'm sure they've got questions today to this scrutiny board as well. But we think that if we are looking at the proposals they have brought forward to us, that we should look at and to reopen Ponds Forge for those particular elite sports, then that's not possible to do without reopening all of Ponds Forge for all the city to enjoy. It's very important, in particular at this time of at this stage in the pandemic, after people being stuck indoors, that they have access to sporting facilities, to leisure facilities. It's pretty much all that some people have, so it's really important that we think we should open it. So that's why we've asked officers to come back with a report telling us how we're going to do this.
Thank you, Mary. We now go to item 6, which is public questions, and I believe that we've got a few questions that need answers. Kate, can you bring them in? Just while you're doing that, we'll just welcome Councillor Mohammed Maroof. He's finally got in. Hi.
Hi there.
Welcome.
Hi.
Welcome, James.
Hi.
My name's Councillor Denise Fox. I'm the chair. Would you like to ask your question?
Well, obviously, hot on the heels of the announcement by Councillor Mary, I will pose the question if that's appropriate, but it probably ties very nicely into any further reports as well. So I will go ahead and do that if the councillors feel that that's appropriate to do right now, which is the original question, although this is a very fast-moving story, as it has been for the last 2 to 3 weeks. Is that appropriate? So the question from principally the clubs is, can the council leaders explain why a decision was taken to keep Ponds Forge closed, given a crucial part of the leisure report stated all the clubs had been temporarily relocated? None of those clubs were consulted or approached about this report. Had they been, we would have hastily presented every single aspect of the proposal and outlined why no other solution other than a partial opening of Ponds Forge with a small funding gap would work for the clubs, communities, SCT and Ponds Forge in the short and medium term. And that might now be gazumped by the recent announcement.
Okay, does someone want to add to that?
To say, thank you for your, yeah, I'll just answer. Terry might want to say something, but thanks for your question. It has been a little bit gazumped. Obviously, you know, when you ask why wasn't Ponds Forge opened originally in the original plan, it's something that was, we said we would open our facilities in phases where we needed to. We obviously put in 50 million in as we know into the other facilities, and Ponds Forge will be another £1.5 million this year to reopen Ponds Forge. We have listened to what the petitioners and yourself and all the emails we've had. Obviously, you'll probably be aware we've had many emails on this subject, and we know you came with a proposal and you went to SCT, and I think you've had some discussions with them, and certainly we want to discuss those with you now as well. We think that elite sports are great, and we understand the Olympics is hopefully next year, and people want to be training and working towards them, the ones that might be going to the Olympics. But we don't think we can open it for elite sports unless we open it for everybody else. And I think that's only fair. You know, it's as expensive or as cheap to open the dry side as it is the wet side. So we think that, and there are many groups other than yourselves use that the Ponds Forge. We've got a lot of disability groups go in there and use the facilities there, and we want to continue with that. So that was something we've discussed constantly since that first press release went out a while back, saying which facilities were open. It's not something in our hearts. Absolutely, we wanted to open Ponds Forge because it is so important for the city and nationally as well, in I believe. And that is why we've listened, we've considered, and we've decided that the best way forward is to bring a report back to Cabinet, which is on the 23rd of September, and you're very welcome to come.
Well, thank you very much. I think I would probably speak on behalf of the clubs principally, because that's been our original campaign, that we would welcome working with the City Trust and the Council to make this happen in any way we can. Obviously, it isn't just about the sports. The secondary spend to the city is a massive part of why we put this forward. It's a huge knock-on effect, and I think this is economics as well as hearts and minds, as well as elite sports. The council report going in on the 23rd is fantastic to hear. It does make comment that there will be another report, and the content, so we hope, would be shared with the clubs in equally the fact that it wasn't shared in the previous one. But like I say, the clubs are desperate to work with, not against, and make something happen to the benefit of everybody within the city.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Biggin. Do you have any more questions? No.
Only that I would probably suggest that if there is a way of the clubs being allowed access in the build-up to a more public opening, I think we would welcome that support from SCT and also Sheffield City Council as quickly as possible. I do know that we're struggling on that side.
Okay. Well,
okay.
I think that's something you need to take up with SCT. All the operational side of it is up to them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay,
Perfect.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
James, thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
Kate, do we have any more joining us? Public? While we're just waiting, we'll just welcome Councillor Chris Rosin-Josephs, who's just joined us. Welcome.
Yeah, sorry I'm late, Chair. I had a slight medical emergency that took me by surprise. So I'm back anyway.
Well, welcome. Okay, is Charlie with us? Kate?
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, welcome. Would you like to ask your question, Charlie?
Hi, well, I'm a local resident, and prior to the lockdown, I regularly took my 2-year-old son swimming at Ponds Forge. So I was very disappointed that it was going to remain closed, but I'm happy to hear that it's reopening. I learned to swim from a young age. I competed in swimming and then trained as a lifeguard when I was a teenager. So it's really important to me that my child has the opportunity to learn to swim and have regular access to swimming facilities to continually build his confidence and skills in the water. When I moved to Sheffield, one of the main things that attracted me to the city was the sports facilities, especially venues such as Ponds Forge. Now, over a decade later, I have a child and I want him to have the opportunities that I moved to the city for. I've been taking my son to baby splash sessions at Ponds Forge every week. I would have loved to have gone more frequently if these sessions had been offered more than just once a week. I often took my son to the weekend and school holiday leisure swim sessions at Ponds Forge. I had also just started bringing him to some of the other term time sessions in the leisure pool, such as the shallow water and ladies sessions, when the toddler pool's closed off, because he's become more confident in the water and we didn't mind spending longer in the main part of the leisure pool. So I've been teaching him to kick his legs and swim across with armbands and then with a pool noodle instead of armbands. Then the lockdown began. It was an activity that we could do together. Not only was it helping him to become more confident in the water, but it was also helping me to lose some of the weight that I gained after pregnancy, especially imperative when one of the biggest risk factors of COVID is obesity. And it was important for maintaining my mental health. As a result of the lockdown, several local swimming facilities have not reopened. Not only can I not currently use Ponds Forge, but other local pools such as King Edward Swimming Pool and Zest Centre have also remained closed. The pools that are reopening are further away and only seem to be offering lane swimming, which is not suitable for us. So I'm hoping that if Ponds Forge is reopening, that they're going to offer something other than lane swimming. Sadly, the facilities at Ponds Forge have become in need of some improvements. Some of the showers were in need of repair, light bulbs needed replacing, the grouting had mould and lockers were often broken. Equipment such as floats in the toddler pool were not replaced, and there were once lots of like animal shaped floats for the kids to play with, but sadly very few remained at the beginning of this year. However, with my son, because I really like the place and the staff are really friendly, and it's within walking distance from my home, which as a single parent is essential to me, because it keeps the cost down, as I don't have to pay to travel to get there. Therefore, I'd really just like to know when I will be able to take my child to suitable swimming sessions at Ponds Forge again.
Thank you, Charlie. Mary, do you want to answer?
Yeah, well, okay. I think we're aiming for October, beginning of October, to reopen Ponds Forge. And those other facilities, I mean, I think Lisa Firth maybe can answer this, but I thought they were opening as well, Zest and King Ted's.
Yeah, the thing is they're planning to open, and because of the financial implications of COVID and the lockdown, it's not possible for them to open immediately, but they are planning to open. As with the council, we've had to take, and with SCT, we've had to take a phased approach. So it's not that the facilities aren't ever going to reopen. It's just that they're having to take time to put in place the COVID secure measures that they need to do to get the staff from furlough and so on. So it's not that they aren't going to open. It's just they're taking a little bit more time to reopen than they would have liked.
Yeah. Okay, so anyway, Ponds Forge is reopening, so then you'll be able to take your little boy, did you say you got to Ponds Forge, and as you say, health and well-being benefits are really significant. So hopefully you'll enjoy that, and especially because I mentioned before, COVID has really shown what we need to do to keep ourselves healthy and how susceptible and vulnerable some people are. So well done yourself. And we will take note of some of the issues you've raised about what needs to, maybe some repairs and maintenance that need to be taken into account, and we'll pass that on to SCT.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you for coming today to ask your question. Kate, do we have anybody else?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, I do think that we've got a question that was raised at the previous scrutiny board, and we said that we would get an answer here. Is that over to you, John?
I think that's over to me, Chair, actually. Yeah.
Sorry, Deborah. Yeah.
No problem. This is a set of questions from DMB Union, who wish to raise their concerns regarding further subsidies being paid to Sheffield Trust. They refer to paragraph 3 of the head of strategic finance, notes that there has been slippage in the budget, which is partly as a result of further millions being handed over to Sheffield City Trust on top of substantial subsidies being paid out in consecutive and previous years. So on the back of that statement, there are 3 questions that they have submitted. The first one, does this committee feel the most recent handing over of public money in the sum of £15 million to Sheffield City Trust, who are now in the process of cutting hundreds of low-paid jobs, as well as keeping venues such as Ponds Forge closed with no date for reopening, is fair when the SCT senior management team suffer no detriment, even when the organisation's business model has clearly failed? Chair, would you like me to read all 3 questions? Or do you want me to take each one?
I think we should take each one. Have we got somebody that's going to answer these? Eugene? or Lisa? Eugene, thank you.
I think from the questions I've seen, I think it might be partly a political answer, but if you want to take them one by one, we could agree that with Terry and Mary. Yeah.
Thank you. So the first question, yep.
Terry? Maybe Terry wants to have a stab as well, but
okay. Councillor Fox.
Chair, thank you very much. I think as the first question says, are we happy? Are we comfortable of handing £15 million up? No, we're not. It's as simple as that. But unfortunately, the situation with COVID, it's kind of reset the dial back to zero on some of these issues. And obviously, as we've heard already with the previous questions, how valued the facilities are in the city, and as a city of sport and the tag we have, obviously we've had to make that. It is within a deal. Is it the best deal? I'm sure everybody would agree that it isn't, that we would expect more. And taking a long-term view on this, and I'm sure you'll explore it more in your committee with the leisure strategy, we're looking to do everything we possibly can. Are we concerned about the redundancies? Of course we're concerned about those redundancies, and we would like to see. I don't know what today's announcement will mean to SCT as they look at the facility. I don't know how that kind of rolls out with the arena and City Hall. Obviously that's for them within their organisation. But just to underline, yes, we are concerned, and yes, we feel for every job loss that may be that is why we've come as we have done at this moment in time to those decisions.
Can I just add something, Chair?
Yes, Councillor Lee.
Yeah, the government have put many grants out for people to apply for, but there is nothing, absolutely nothing that at the moment that the Sheffield City Trust can apply for in terms of their leisure facilities. They have put in bids for the arena and City Hall to the cultural grants that have been announced, but nothing for the leisure facilities with the model that we have in Sheffield, and of course all over the country as well. We've all got slightly different models, and many cities are in the same boat that we're in that they cannot get any help from government. So it would be really, really useful if everybody who's got an interest in Ponds Forge and our leisure facilities to write to government and say, let's address this issue, please, because I keep going back on it. Health and well-being, if it wasn't paramount before, it's absolutely at top of the agenda now.
Thank you. The next question, Deborah.
Thank you, Chair. Second question. Does this committee believe the time has now come to bring the sport, leisure and cultural services Sheffield City Trust is responsible for back in-house?
Okay, who wants to answer? Don't all shout at once.
I think that's a political question. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, Councillor Fox.
Chair, as I just answered, we are considering the leisure strategy going forward, and I think that the administration will put its thoughts into that leisure strategy, and when the time's right, we will be making them announcements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And the next question.
Thank you, Chair. Final question. Will this committee recommend to the leader and relevant cabinet members the urgent need to consider bringing these services in-house to ensure the security of hundreds of jobs and the long-term stability of these services that mean so much to the people of Sheffield?
Right. Councillor Lee?
I think it's the same answer, really.
Yeah,
same answer as Terry's just said. We're reviewing, and we'll come back with a decision about where we go with our strategy.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll now move on. That's all the public questions. We'll move on to item 7, which is the leisure reopening subsidy, Sheffield City Trust Place Leisure. I was informed that we might have had some people observing from the Sheffield City Trust. Are they not here?
Yeah, they are. So John Warner, the chair of their audit committee, and Stuart Ridley, who's the senior officer available, are observing. They haven't actually got an invite that puts them on the panel, but they are observing.
That's good, because we'd like it to be fed back to the board what the feeling and what's been said today. So thank you, Eugene. Okay, who's going to start with the
I can start just by introducing
Sorry.
the report. Sorry, I can.
Hang on, somebody's waving at me. Councillor Richards? You're muted, Sinead.
I thought I'd unmuted. Can we ask the representatives from Ponds Forge to actually be part of the meeting so that we can ask them questions rather than them just observing and taking back their observations? Is that possible, please?
They've had an invitation to the meeting, but they're not in the room, I'm afraid. And they're not on attendees neither.
So are they not observing?
They're
They could be watching through the public gallery.
Yeah.
So is that their choice, Chair? Were they invited to be in? Because certainly when we last discussed it, we were a bit regretful of the fact that nobody from the trust was present to answer questions directly, and we seemed to.
Yeah. If I just come in there, we did invite the Chief Exec, Andrew Snelling, and David Gray, the Chair, but unfortunately they are both on holiday. So I then asked if anybody else could come, and we got two members volunteered that they would come and listen, but not in a position to answer questions, unfortunately, today. Okay, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I'd just like to register what I think from people's body language a lot of people are thinking, which is it's deeply disappointing that if they were the trust were invited, they've chosen not to attend. So we're handing over £16.5 million of public money, and nobody from the trust decided it would be appropriate to attend the meeting. I think in some way we need to feed back that, certainly in my part, extreme disappointment at that decision, which I personally think was very unwise. Thank you.
Did I respond, Chair? Is that okay?
Yeah.
As the Chair has said, the Chief Executive is on leave, and there is an officer from Sheffield City Trust who was intending to join us as a head of communications, but unfortunately his IT has failed. Therefore, he is watching in the public gallery. He's just actually asked me to pass on that message to say he was intending to be here, but unfortunately the technology has failed. He was going to help with any questions, or particularly take them back to the board to answer. So we must apologise for that.
Councillor Miskel.
I'd like to really echo what colleagues from across, I think, the political spectrum have really said there. I think it's really disappointing that staff members and senior staff members from Sheffield City Trust aren't here today. You know, clearly it is very difficult when people are on holiday, but we are doing this remotely. This is a really significant decision for Sheffield City Council. It's a really important thing for the people of Sheffield, and it is really significant for Sheffield City Trust. So I think it's really disappointing and perhaps quite telling that we don't have anyone here from Sheffield City Trust. The purpose of this meeting is to scrutinise, and they should be open to that scrutiny too.
Councillor Hurst.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, really, I have to echo what Ben's just said. That is almost taking words exactly out of my mouth. But I do feel that it rather takes away the point of a scrutiny meeting to examine decisions and to examine how they were made and to examine the effect that they're having on the city, and to look at future arrangements that will benefit the people of the city broadly, and also the teams that need to use facilities for training, if the trust aren't willing to engage with us. And I'd like to consider how we go forwards and ask questions of them in the future. And if we're going to rack up some questions now. When we get the responses, how will we get that interaction? It's really quite concerning.
Thank you, Councillor Rose. Councillor Richards.
Yeah, following on from all of that, I think it does feel that they haven't taken us terribly seriously, frankly, and we are here representing the people of Sheffield, and as Councillor Smith said, we are representing people and have agreed to pay £16.5 million in order to make sure that the people of Sheffield have decent facilities. I'm also a bit concerned. I would just like to ask Councillor Lee, when we said we would ask officers to find funding, is that from all sources or is that sources within the council? Because otherwise I do feel that we as a council are just the only people who do funding, and I would like to see that other people join in. Otherwise it just looks like we're always the stopgap at the end, and I don't feel happy about that.
Well, I'll just bring in Eugene now because he's had his hand up for a while.
I can understand members' concerns about giving the extended public money, but I would just like to reassure members that as well as Stuart having IT problems, the audit chair, John Warner, they did not choose not to attend. So I'd just like to say that on their behalf, because of the difficulties of when we were trying to arrange these meetings, and both the chair, who passed on his apologies, and Andrew Snelling, the chief exec, indicate they are willing to come, and they would be, but seriously, they both, neither of them have been on holiday all year like a lot of us, and that was the time. And I think when we discussed it earlier in terms of arranging this meeting, we really need them there as the most senior officers, and I'm sure we could accommodate that, and they'd be most willing to do that at a future meeting. So any questions and issues, I'm sure we could pick up and pass back to them and get the committee, because I understand the committee's point, but I do want to emphasise that they were wanting to be here if they could have been. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
I'm a bit surprised that somebody would go on holiday at a time when this is happening, and that they haven't made arrangements for somebody else to speak to us. This is a really major thing for us, Ponds Forge. And again, I think that we've been undervalued and undersold by Civ at this point.
Okay, well, thank you, Sinead.
Sorry.
I'm just, somebody else is indicating. Councillor Maroof. Is this something that you want to add to this point? Or
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in there. Basically, I don't have a great deal of confidence left in. I know what Eugene has just said there, and I'm agreeing with what Councillor Richards has said, and earlier my colleague Councillor Smith has said. How can I have confidence in handing over 16.5 million to an organisation that can't be bothered to be here? I have a lack of confidence in that. And clearly we found 16.5 million from somewhere, and we find it important enough to be attending this meeting to discuss how we're going to be spending that. And yet the organisation that we're handing it over to, in normal circumstances, you'd expect them to be there, or at least make some sort of substitution or something like that, because we're going to ask lots of questions which are now going to remain completely unanswered as we move forward on this. So I know other people have said that, but I think it's important that I just wanted to get that message across.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Maroof. All these points are noted, and I'm sure the people that are listening from the board will take it back to the board and make sure future meetings that somebody's in attendance. Thank you.
Chair, they are trying to again get the link and trying to get in to talk to us. They are keeping me informed. There is an officer ahead of communications and also a trustee, John Warner. They are trying to join.
Okay, let's move on from this, because we I'm conscious that we've had an hour and we've not even got to the report yet. So people are waving at me.
Councillor Auckland, sorry.
Yeah, I've had Councillor Lodge and Councillor Auckland waving at me.
Yeah, for a bit.
I really want to move on from this point now.
Right.
Sorry.
That's what I wanted to suggest.
Just
that we move
on moving on. I echo everyone's point. I mean, these people on the COVID overspend, this corner of the council, very important as it is, it's responsible for 9 1/5 of the reported figure of money that we've had to find. It's big money. But sort of forgive me, but Councillor Gibson was a representative for a while. I wonder if he'll get an opportunity.
Can we move on from this point, Chair? Because we're not getting into the scrutiny.
But let's get going.
This is not. It's not appropriate at the moment. Let's move on. I've asked if we can move on. So, who's going to present the report?
I was going to present the report.
Lisa, are you starting? Thank you.
Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah, fine.
So I am making an assumption that everyone has read the report. And this is a follow-on from the leader decision that was made in August to commit the £15 million to SCT, Sheffield City Trust. Just for a point of note, I'm referring to Sheffield City Trust and not CIV, as CIV was rebranded as Sheffield City Trust over the summer. So that is what I'll be referring to. So there was a commitment of £15 million additional funding to Sheffield City Trust in order for it to open all of its facilities, with the exception of Ponsford, which we've just covered, but also an additional 1.6 million as a contract payment to Places Leisure to enable them to open Graves, Thorncliffe and Wisewood leisure centres. And the reason for the payment to Places Leisure, just to make that clear before we concentrate on Sheffield City Trust, is the contract that is in place with Places Leisure would normally see Places make a payment annually to the council as a result of operating those 3 facilities at Graves, Thorncliffe and Wisewood. But because of a contract variation, a change of law that was put in place due to COVID-19 and the lockdown, that means that we have to cover Places Leisure's loss of contractual income because of the pandemic. So there's a different element of why we're making a payment to Places Leisure. And these payments are for the financial year 2020 through to April 21. The 15 million that is being that was recommended to as a grant payment to Sheffield City Trust would allow them to reopen the facilities listed. So all the facilities except for Ponsford. I think it is important to, in terms of context, that Sheffield City Trust do usually turn over around £30 million of income each year, and that includes income from the arena in City Hall and from events, conferences and banqueting at Ponsford. And so the lockdown and having to close those facilities indefinitely has had a significant impact on their ability to generate income. And I think the other key point to bring to your attention is that while the facilities remained closed, so while all of the SCT facilities remained closed, that was costing SCT and indirectly the council £11 million in this financial year. So the options that SCT presented to the council were that to keep all the facilities closed would cost around 11 million. And then anywhere upwards from 11 million to 16.6 million to reopen all of the facilities, including Ponsford. The budget that has been agreed before the lockdown. Sorry, I'm just having a look at the report now. The budget that was agreed before the lockdown was 2.8 million of revenue. So anything over and above that is a significant increase on unbudgeted income. And I think finally, just the point in the report is that the recommendation that Sheffield City Trust made to the council, which excluded at the time Springs Leisure Centre, it was felt that needed to open because of the demographic and the geography of Springs. And the exclusion of Ponsford was recommended at the time because of the additional cost of 1.6 million to reopen Ponsford in this financial year. Was felt it was over and above what the council could afford for that facility. And with opening the other facilities across the city, felt that gave a good geographical spread, albeit without use of the 50-metre training pool for the elite clubs and also the diving pit. I think that's probably the key points from that report, if that is sufficient.
Thank you, Lisa. Eugene, do you want to add anything? Ryan, do you want to add anything? I've lost him on my screen. Yeah.
No, thanks, Chair.
Okay, any of the politicians want to add anything? Councillor Lee?
No, I think Lisa's covered it. Perhaps people want to ask questions, that's fine.
That's fine, absolutely fine. Well, I've already had Councillor Lodge indicate. Would you like to come in?
Thank you. I had a number of questions, and one or two of me taken out because of the announcement at the start of the meeting. So I think very pleased that Cabinet's looked at this and looking at the proposals again and trying to get this reopened. But I think at the start of this, just a comment that we should make really, in that there will be a number of people watching this who've been employed at Ponds Forge and other venues within SCT, and I don't think we should forget that a number of these have been made redundant and other people are considering what it means for them. I'm sure we're all conscious of this, but while it may not come out as part of the conversation as we're going and discussing things here, I think everybody will recognise that some of these people will be affected, and we need to be sympathetic to their situation on here. And whilst it won't come out overtly in this, it is part of the considerations that we're looking at this. I think there's a number of questions that, and I see John's just joined us now, which is good timing, John. I think there's a number of questions really on the methodology that we use around selecting which sites to open. Lisa just said there about Springs that was added late to the list that was proposed because of looking at the demographics and things in the area. So I'd like to understand a little bit, if we can, if we've got a bit more about the methodology, decide on which site should open. Do you want me to give all these questions, Chair? I'll not go through them all, but there's a few questions rather than going back and forwards.
Yeah, I'm sure
yeah.
People are taking notes.
Okay. Yeah. I think in the costings that were mentioned by SCT for reopening Ponds Forge, we've since seen the proposal from the aquatic clubs. So there's a couple of questions there around that. Was the cost from SCT including potential income from the aquatic clubs, or did it exclude that? Had it been taken into account, I suppose, into consideration? So if that's the case, is there some offset of the cost now, because the aquatic clubs are talking about the revenue that they're prepared to put into it and things there? How robust are the aquatic clubs costings? Have we looked at those to see where they are? Because I know they talk about they're waiting for the universities and see what their contributions were. So it would be helpful to get an understanding there. I think within the report, it talks about on a number of venues why they were selected, and it talks about gym usage at different sites, sort of Springs and the age profile. It talks about Concord and why it was selected because of the demographics in the area and things like that. When it comes to Ponds Forge in the report, it doesn't really make a reference to why that around those same issues. So the question there is, what's the gym usage? Do we know what the gym usage and membership down at Ponds Forge is? Because it picks up on this on the other sites, but not necessarily on that site. And that would be helpful to understand that, because Ponds Forge being central as it is, for many people, people located in the city centre, are not necessarily going to be in a position to get to gyms where they can travel using public, if they have to travel using public transport, whereas in the city centre, there's that site that's there and it's accessible for more people being in the centre rather than out and about. And a final question I'll put there is, why it's for the council rather than the trust. Have we looked at what the wider economic impact on the closure of Ponds Forge or the delay in reopening it would be? The reason being on that is I work in the area around Ponds Forge, and every weekend in normal times there seems to be an event on down there, and the hotels in that area are very busy, and parking, on street parking as well as roundabout in the car parks is very busy. So if the clubs aren't allowed to put events on, there's a knock-on effect there. So it's looking at how quickly, when the announcement comes from the government that says events can be put on, can they turn it around and put events on? Because we don't want to be left caught cold if there's the opportunity to put things on for people to then go to another city or venue if they're prepared. So it's the state of preparedness, I suppose, for SCT, and for the council, the economic impact. I'll leave it there, Chair, because I'm sure there's other questions that other people have, but I may want to come back later, but I certainly want to comment later.
Thank you, Councillor Lodge. Who's going to start answering these? Eugene, right?
Are there questions from me or for SCT? I'm not sure which council lodge you wanted to answer them.
I think there are some that would be SCT. There are some within the report make reference to the report and things in there.
Okay.
So I appreciate some will be for SCT, and hopefully if we can't get an answer today, we get an answer afterwards.
So if I start, would that be helpful then? Because on some of them I can certainly. So in terms of the methodology of which sites should open, that is largely for SCT. However, what I can say is that the work, when we were working with SCT, they presented us as officers and then subsequently councillors and cabinet with a series of 8 options of differing, one of which was to keep everything closed, which I described earlier was a cost of around 11 million, and then option 8 was to reopen everything at a cost of 16.6 million, and then the other 4 options were a range of options in between that, with a variation of what they felt would be best to open to get the best let's say coverage of access opportunity across the city, coupled with I want to say lowest cost. There's a huge cost to all of it, but actually there is a different cost between 11 million and 16.6. So the methodology that was presented was if for instance at EISS there's a contribution to be made from governing bodies that are based there as well. So to not open that would see a loss of income rather than an increase in income. So there were some of the things that were taken into account. If I can just move on to the aquatics question on whether that proposal is feasible. And at its very basic level, the costs that were put into the public domain and the proposal that the aquatic clubs put forward were the figures in terms of how much it would cost to open Ponds Forge purely for the 50-metre pool and the diving pit. However, what it didn't completely take account of is what the impact would be then on the maintenance and life cycle costs of that side of things. Also, there was a proposal, included in that proposal was an element of crowdfunding, and also the risk then would be passed on to the council should that crowdfunding or additional income from the clubs not come to fruition. So I think as Councillor Lee referred to earlier, actually it wasn't a sound, I don't mean to say it wasn't a sound proposition. It wasn't a financially feasible proposition for the number of users that it would help. And that's why I believe that Councillor Lee and Fox and colleagues have asked for a further report that considers the opening of the whole venue for a wider use, if that makes sense. The gym usage, I'm going to refer to SCT colleagues. However, I do believe that they considered the alternate facilities that were available when they proposed not to open Ponds Forge. And I think I will defer to Eugene on the wider economic impact for the city, other than to say that until until the events are back in and up and running, it's actually a negative impact to reopen Ponds Forge, if that makes sense, because we haven't got that event income, the banqueting and conferencing is the same with the arena that SCT would expect to get from that, if that helps.
Thank you, Lisa. Eugene, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, it's probably just to confirm. So at the moment, in terms of the decisions we've had so far on the venues, I think Lisa's right. We'd always try and look at the economic impact. The economic impact at the moment is negligible because the events can't have spectators as things currently stand. So, but as Brian was saying, as things move forward, and things like the arena as well, yes, it'll obviously be part of decision making. And I think the other point about that is, on the other hand, a lot of this obviously has been about where we are in the short term this year about opening up the facilities and coming back from the impact of COVID. I think Terry and Mary referred to at the beginning, behind all this, we've got the work on the leisure strategy. And I think that will lead to, because all the decisions we've taken at the moment about what are we doing with these venues and the impact of that financially up till the 31st of March. The really key issue, importantly, is what's going to happen from the 1st of April. And that needs to link to the leisure strategy that we're bringing forward to Cabinet. And that'll be a much wider issue about kind of what are we doing for the rest of the financial year. And that'll be another opportunity to build in wider economic and community benefits would be my answer as well. So I think looking future focused as well.
Thank you, Eugene. Welcome, John. I see you at the bottom of my screen. Is there anything that you'd like to add here? Do you have any figures on the gym usage for Ponds Forge?
If I just would like to add an initial comment, I did agree to sit in on this scrutiny meeting as an observer and was all set at 4:30 to attend, but I didn't receive a link until I've joined just now. So there was absolutely no intention not to attend this meeting as an observer. So please take it from me as a trustee. I'm not part of the executive, but I am a trustee, that we do take this very, very seriously. And we are absolutely aware of the commitment that the council is proposing making to the trust. So I would like to reassure you of that as a trustee of the City Trust. So just like to put the impression that we weren't bothered about attending. That was not correct. It was the fact we weren't sent a link. I have been taking notes because I have been watching it on the public view, and I will take the detailed notes back to the executive so that you have a full answer to any questions that are being raised. As purely a trustee, I don't have the intimate grasp of all the individual figures as to what the gym usage is at Ponds Forge, etc. But I do know that those figures were available and looked at when the 8 options were put forward, and the costs of opening Ponds Forge with or without the dry side were certainly factored into the calculations. But apologies for not being able to give any more detailed information, but I will take that back to the executive.
Thank you, John. Brian, any more?
Yeah, Chair, there was one, and it was just something that I noted within the report. I know we're talking, we're leaning very heavily on the SCT side of things on here, and I think it's just recognising the work that's gone in to get some of these things open. So places as well as SCT getting a number of these sites open. But there's just one last thing I picked up in the report that I meant to ask, and apologies, thank you for letting me ask it now. It mentions about the golf courses and looking at potentially closing one of the courses come November. And I just wondered if there's any news on that. And I will declare that Burley Golf Course is in Burley Ward. Don't want to put too much pressure on you here, but the chair of the committee is also a Burley Ward councillor. Just it might help you in your decision making there. But it's just wondering if there's any further thought on that, because I'm sure since the report was drafted, there'll be more usage, or is there being increased usage or less usage on across these sites, and whether it's still viable to keep all three open, I suppose. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lodge. Is anybody anything to add to that?
I don't know if John wants to answer, but I can answer if that's helpful. The colleagues at SCT are actually reviewing the usage of the golf courses. You're absolutely right, Councillor Lodge, because they're basically evaluating how many people have been using the golf courses since they reopened back in early June, I think it was. Golf, as I think most people will understand, is quite seasonal, and the usage, particularly the pay and play, drops off significantly when it comes to around November time. And so I believe the rationale for that was looking at how we can actually make the golf courses most cost effective during the winter period, but that is being reviewed.
Thank you, Lisa. Councillor Oakland.
Thank you, Chair. I was intrigued by one of the answers. I think it might have been Councillor Mary Lee, who said to James Biggin he would have to talk to the trust about some operational matters. Now, I've certainly had a conversation with Mr. Biggin about following his emails. I mean, a lot of us members have had those emails and responded to them, and I just want to emphasise that the club seem very keen to work positively with the council in order to open Ponsfords in the most economic way. But I just wonder. I mean, with 15 million of our money going in now and previously money, I would have thought legally it might be for SIV to decide these things, for SCT to decide, but I would have thought we surely must have had a lot of input here. I just wonder, Mary, if the decision not to reopen Ponsfords and to mothball it then was an operational decision by the trust, was it an economic decision by the council, or was it, you know, accepted politically by the administration that was a necessary situation to accept? I've got a couple of others.
I understand what, yeah, Mr. Biggin, I think, was asking about whether they could assist SCT in the reopening on a practical level, and I know they do that anyway. They very much work very closely with at Ponsforge on a practical level. You know, they have coaches there, they have their staff there, the clubs have their staff there assisting. So I think that's what he meant, and so that's why I said, you know, they will need to discuss those operational matters with the trust, because the pool has to be opened safely, and everybody has to adhere to health and safety precautions and social distancing, and all those things have to be discussed and put in place. So I'm not going to get into that because it's not my role to talk about how you open up a pool safely. But I'm sure the trust will discuss that with the clubs over the next few weeks anyway. And what was the other question about? Sorry, it was about the.
Well, Chair, we have a government that makes more U-turns than a corkscrew, really. But how was it welcome as the decision is? How was the decision made in the first place to mothball Ponsforge?
I think
was it a political one that the administration was happy to take? Was it financial by the council, or was it just the trust who put forward, this is what we suggest, and we've just accepted it?
Yeah, well, I think Lisa explained in her, when she talked about the trust, about how that was presented. The trust looked at a number of options, from keeping everything closed to opening everything, and they looked at various variations, so keeping some closed, some open, and that was presented to us on the first presentation. On the presentation that we had, Springs wasn't on the list for reopening, and we asked for that to be reopened because of all the reasons that's been already discussed so far. Ponsforge was not on the list to reopen, and at that point in time, a couple of weeks ago, that's what we went with. However, there was a lot of discussion about Ponsforge and the importance, not just to the people who use it and the elite clubs that use it, but obviously people in in Sheffield that use it, and clubs and schools and so on and so forth. And also, I think it's got to play its part in reopening the city. And I think, I don't know if it's in this report, but there's certainly, I think in the press statement we put out, you know, this pandemic, we're at a stage where we're opening up, which is good, but it's evolving. We don't know if we're going to have a second wave or whether we'll get through the winter comfortably, but we need to move forward. And we're not going to move forward by keeping things closed. If people want to come, if we want people to come back in the city and use the city centre and come back to work in the city centre, and I know a lot of people who work in the city centre do use Ponds Forge. I know people who go down there in the lunch hour and have a swim, which is great. And I'm sure there's lots and lots of people across the city who do that. And we want to give them that opportunity, as well as everybody else that uses it for leisure, sport and serious elite sport.
Thank you.
Chair, so everything I think that Councillor Lee said is true. Wasn't it true on the 11th of August though? That's really the question. And when we're giving them, frankly, and forgive me, Mr. Warner, but based on our previous meeting and the information we had, it's not. Thank you for being a trustee, but in terms of the management of the trust, I've not got a lot of confidence in how things have been run certainly in recent years, and I hope that our own officers are going to be crawling over, you know, the proposals and figures to satisfy themselves that for the support the council is now given, the taxpayer is getting a fair deal, not least the public who want to use it. I've got to. Just one other question on the 10.
Councillor Fox wanted to come in on that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just to reassure Councillor Oakland, we are meeting sometimes on a daily basis, and members are meeting on a regular basis, going through and challenging every decision, but we have to reassess our priorities on an ongoing basis. And at that moment in time, some of these options are like photographs in time. At that moment in time, we have to make those various decisions as we have done. These decisions were given to us by SCT, and I think members have to realise that SCT is an independent company. I know we are their main customer. We are their main negotiating with them on a number of these issues. But I just want to reassure members that we are meeting on a regular basis, and as the process has come through from COVID, we are continually looking at, and as leisure has become more and more a factor in this, and the way that we had to assess with statutory obligations, with schools going back for statutory swimming, etc., right through the process. And now we've got to a point where we have now got to look at opening Ponds Forge. But I have to sit here and say to you, and publicly say, there is a cost to opening Ponds Forge, and that cost may be so much this year, but there is an ongoing cost going forward. We have to take that decision in a prudent way, and that's where we are at this moment in time. And that's why, as a cabinet, we have now asked for officers to come forward with a paper that we can then make that decision on. And that's what we're looking at right now. To go forward, but just to reassure members, we are meeting on a regular basis with SCT.
Councillor Lee.
Well, just Terry said what I would more or less say, and you know, we've listened to people, we've listened to the groups that have come forward and the proposals that have come forward, and we, if you want to call it a U-turn, Councillor Auckland, that's fine, but U-turns are done, and if you make the right decision, then a U-turn is a good thing to do.
Thank you. Do you have any more questions, Councillor Auckland?
I just got one other thing, just on the numbers in the report. It's just this bit about backlog of maintenance and swimming pools being, you know, notoriously difficult, the water and all the rest of it. Is the asset in reasonable state? Are the assets that we're looking at in reasonable state? You know, even allowing for the regrettable backlog in maintenance. There's nothing nasty, very nasty lurking there. I say this. I remember the swimming pool at up at Norton at the Rollington Sports Centre. I mean, that was going to fall down any minute for 20 years, but it kept going anyway. Is it how safe is it?
Okay,
That's me done, Chair.
Thank you. Can anybody answer that?
I can answer if that's helpful. It's not going to fall down, Councillor Oakland. That's well, I shouldn't say that because never say never, but it isn't in a state of disrepair that it's going to fall down. However, it does need significant investment over the next 5 years on that backlog maintenance. And also within this financial year, it costs a lot to maintain the life cycle costs of Ponds Forge. It does need significant investment, and that is something that we are working with SCT to look at. But it's not in such a state of disrepair that it's going to fall down.
Thank you, Lisa. Councillor
Don't put that in the
Smith.
minutes.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just 3 questions. Simple one first. That's about the timeline. When did the trust approach the council for additional funding?
Eugene?
I think we've answered this, but I'll say it again. I mean, as the committee members know, the point at which we were talking depends what we mean by additional funding, because as we know from the previous scrutiny board, we had a recognition right back to those meetings last year that you were rightly asking about, around the GT report, where we got some financial issues already. I think what's happened since then is COVID have exacerbated those, so during that period of lockdown, we've obviously been assessing things, and as Terry said, we've instituted a series of regular meetings with the trustees and their officers that I'm involved as well, and members are. And as we've kind of got through that point about the impact of COVID, and it's been reported to Cabinet and to the scrutiny board about the financial impact that had on income. Income impacts are the biggest issue in our budget, and this is the biggest impact we've got from the point of view of the venues being shut. And one of our difficulties that I think we've logged there and we've been lobbying on is unfortunately the government compensation scheme for income losses doesn't cover losses from trusts. So that's something we've been working with members and MPs on lobbying government about, and not just us. Manchester and similar cities that have got trusts have been lobbying on that point about the fact that the government isn't providing the income compensation that it is to some councils. So all that's been going off, and then as it came to the point at which it's possible to open venues, we were in that ongoing dialogue with the trust about that. And as Terry explained, we're in the interesting position that the trust are an independent organisation, but we work closely with them. They've been having reports to their board, and we've been looking at those, assessing those, and that led eventually to the meeting with members. So I think my answer in short is we've been dealing with the ongoing issues for some time. COVID made it worse. As part of the decisions about how and when to open, those dialogues are ongoing. So they've been continuous, really, and assessing the actual impact has been a part of the overall assessment of the 70-80 million pound impact we've got on the council as a whole that we've reported through to Cabinet and scrutiny.
Thanks for the information, Eugene, but it didn't really answer my question. So roughly when did the council know that it would have to be providing a significant amount of money? So well, is it May, June?
Well, May and June. I think we reported that through to Cabinet, and it's gone to scrutiny recently. As I said, the first impact is we basically, as Lee said, if we had done nothing, we already had an £11 million impact this year that was reported through to Cabinet just from the venues being shut. Sorry, 9 million. The £9 million that was reported through, I think it went to Cabinet in July. Ryan might confirm. So that's been public. So yes, obviously we knew in May and June that was all part of the assessment of the £80 million impact on COVID. That's what I was trying to explain. So yes, we did. And then as we've got into August and September, we've got into assessing, once we could open, what are the additional impacts? And as Lisa said, if we'd have kept everything shut, it would have still been 11 million rather than the 9. But what we've got into now is if we do open, there are additional costs associated with that. Did that explain a bit more clearly?
It did. There's a follow-up question, I guess, is for Councillor Lee. So if we knew that we needed a significant amount of money in June, going back to what some of the questioners said right at the very beginning, the decision and the announcement to provide the funding was in August. Why did the council choose not to consult with users of those facilities when it had, by the sound of it, at least 2 months to do so?
Well, there was a period when we couldn't open because the government still had restrictions, and we didn't know when that was going to happen. We didn't know when those restrictions were going to be taken off. And I think that may have been, I can't remember now, was it that July that they took the restrictions off gyms and leisure centres? So until then, we had no idea. And as you know, the government announces these things, you know, he just announces them out of the blue. There's no warning. And I think that at the time there was some contradictory statements made by Boris Johnson about gyms and leisure centres. But anyway, that was the first when we were aware that the leisure centres and the gyms could open. That's when we knew what we had to make some decisions. But we did know. We knew that this 11 million was there on 11 million that we would have to find to keep to help maintain the facilities. And if they were going to open, we knew it would cost the council money because of social distancing and everything that you have to put in place, and the extra cleaning, everything that goes in place, and that's costing us as a council extra money as well because of the social distancing, the extra cleaning, the toilet attendants we put in. Civ have similar, and Places Leisure have similar issues that they have to face as well. Some of them may not cost some money, but some do. And say social distances reduces capacity that you can allow in the gyms. It means people have to book. There's all sorts of factors you have to take into account about when and where, how you open up gyms. And it was, we didn't know until the government made the announcement that we were waiting.
Chair, could I please add something to answer Councillor Smith's email on the back of what Councillor Lee's just said? Is that okay?
Yes, you can. I just want to tell Councillor Hurst that I've got her down.
Okay, just to add, if it helps, I think there was a decision in June, which was a leader decision to commit additional grant funding to Sheffield City Trust as a result of the lockdown. So that was one decision. But as Councillor Lee said, we didn't know until, I think it was the 5th of July, it might be a couple of days different. We didn't know until about the 5th of July that gyms and leisure facilities were going to be able to reopen. And until that announcement was made, we didn't know what the restrictions were going to be. And so we worked really closely with SCT, drilling down to the numbers to say, okay, this is the social distancing, this is the requirements, this is how you're going to be able to operate your facilities. And also, this is what what other core cities are doing. This is what the industry is telling us about the confidence of people to go back, and therefore the level of incomes that you might be able to generate. So things like, as I mentioned earlier, like Arena and City Hall and Ponds Forge and Hillsborough actually can't generate the level of income that they used to do. So the reason it was 11th of August was because we essentially worked with SCT during July. So from the announcement at the beginning of July, for the following 3 weeks then, to get this information together and work through, I want to say, the models for each of the options, which is why it took the time that it did to really make some assumptions about the income, the social distancing, the consumer confidence, what if there was a second lockdown, and so on. So, and then that came to the decision at the end of July, I think, when cabinet members made the decision, and then the report followed. So I hope that helps a little bit with the timeline.
Just one final question, Chair, if I may. Just want to go back to the confidential audit report from Grant Thornton that the committee reviewed in October last year, which members of the committee will remember was pretty shocking. Certainly one of the worst audit reports that I've ever seen. And it raised some significant questions about, I'll choose my words with care, financial management within Sheffield City Trust. It's very disappointing that we haven't been given the follow-up report that we've been told was available. It's not mentioned in the report we've had today. So I'd just like to ask, given the serious findings of that audit report last year, what did the council do in terms of due diligence to satisfy itself that the appropriate changes to the financial management of Sheffield City Trust have been put in place before we gave it another £16.5 million? Thank you.
Who wants to answer that? Eugene?
Right, Ryan may want to have more. I think actually, I think if we can clarify further, but I think people had access to what was effectively the final version of the GT report, but I think that Ryan might want to add further on that. I think as a follow-up to that, and in the work we're doing jointly with SCT, we are at the moment currently engaging further consultants using Deloitte to do some more work on exactly that point and about an assurance. And as I said, back to the point before, there's an assurance here that is needed for the trustees as an independent body, but also for the council about the use of public money. And we've got a commission in place to appoint them and have that, so we've got transparency between us about the use of that money. That work is only just starting, and is obviously something that when we bring further reports back in the year is something that will be taken into account in decision making. So we're basically following up on what we did on some of the Grant Thornton work before, using similar consultants. Ryan, did you want to add anything?
Only just to say, so you're quite right. The report that the committee considered back in October was substantially the same as the final version. We were literally talking about typos that were corrected for the final version, so nothing of substance changed. The commission that Eugene just referred to is actually a joint commission between the council and the trust. So the trustees have been involved in that appointment and are very keen to see that work progress. It's a business review that's going to be undertaken. And they're as keen as we are to understand how, what changes can be made or what improvements can be made to the operating model at Sheffield City Trust to make it better. Since last October and before that time as well, the working relationship between officers at the council, finance officers particularly at the council, but also some ELISA staff have tightened significantly. We see a lot more of the Sheffield City Trust staff now than we used to. We meet with them, I think Terry said, daily. It sometimes feels like that, and then sometimes in fact is, to make sure that we're staying on top of the financial position that they're in and trying to keep as close to it as we possibly can, recognising the fact that they are genuinely a separate organisation, but one that we are clearly providing significant amounts of public money to support.
Thank you. John, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, pleased to comment on that. Since the Grant Thornton report, as I think both Eugene and Ryan have said, there has been regular dialogue between the council with the executive of the trust and with trustees present, and I've sat in on a number of those meetings. And there's also constructive work going on between the two organisations with the consultants who are reviewing the forecasts that have been put forward to support the council support for the trust and the various models that we use to put together the cash requirements. So we are working very constructively with the council at the current time. Also, I think comment was made previously about the state of the premises and the report on the backlog of maintenance, and we are also working closely with the council on that schedule as well. So it is very much a joint work programme to ensure that a level of quality of facility is maintained. So from an external viewpoint as a trustee, I would certainly emphasise the fact that there is a much closer working relationship, and the finance team at the trust is putting in a tremendous amount of work to help the consultants, but also with regard to the audit that KPMG are currently taking place in order to satisfy the requirements of the Luxembourg Stock Exchange with regard to the bond. So there is a lot of scrutiny of the finance function at the City Trust, and we are certainly collaborating with all parties to make sure that that goes as smoothly as possible.
Thank you, John. Councillor Maroof.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just before I begin, I mean, what we're discussing today obviously affects thousands of employees and hundreds of thousands of people who actually use these facilities, not least of all the reputation of Sheffield as a city of sport. So I'm pretty pleased that John has actually joined us. And there were technical difficulties. I can vouch for that. I had similar problems. Can I start with sort of a macro issue here, Chair? And then I've got a couple of questions that will follow on from this. What it feels like to me is that we've got a house here that the foundations are actually failing on, and they need to either be replaced or piled. And what we're trying to do and have been doing with the money that we've been sending into the trust is basically using good old-fashioned wood chip to cover the cracks. And I think we can't continue with that for very much longer. And I'd like to ask the officers, do they genuinely believe that further funding put into the trust will yield a better result, or do we need to look at this a little bit more fundamentally? The reason I ask that question is there's going to be hundreds of people out there who are going to be affected by this, either through redundancy, like Councillor Fox said before, and people who use these facilities. So that is one of my questions. The second one is, in terms of using consultants, is this an admission of the fact that we've run out of ideas in terms of business acumen, etc.? And following on from that, just another observation here. We are still the owners of all these properties, the City Council. And is there going to come a stage where our tenant or our contractor, whatever you may like to call them, will return the keys to us and say, here you are, we can't do this anymore? And are we not trying to appease them by funding it further? And a further question is, what has actually changed? What has actually changed financially for the council since you made the original decision not to open Ponds Forge? So there's a number of questions and observations there, and can I have the right to actually come back on some of them, please, Chair?
Thank you. We'll get some, Councillor Fox.
Chair, thanks for this, and I just think we need to reset the dial back to where we were. We have just come through 10 years of austerity measures. We have been putting on SCT and our leisure facilities for 10 years of the stifling cuts from this government. We've tried to get SCT to deliver a service for Sheffield on zero subsidy. It was at your board with members here that we realised, didn't we, in October, after the £1 million that we had to emergency bank, that subsidy of zero was unachievable, and that we then put 2.8 million in at the start of the year in our budget going forward. So what we have to come back from is a position that the facilities and the money that are trying to run it have been under the spotlight and been under the cosh for 10 years in these austerities. Now around the piece, when we was coming to look at the funding and to look at the issues that Councillor Smith and Councillor Mohammed Maroof has already said, is on some of those funding issues, we have tried to lobby hard on government. Some of the authorities who had the leisure services in-house have been awarded government money. We haven't as a trust service. So we've had to make those hard decisions as we have done. So we're coming on back of 10 years of this austerity programme, and then we're being asked to deliver, or SCT are then being asked to deliver. But going forward, that is why the leisure strategy going forward is so crucial to us, and how we then have to make those decisions, which will be even more crucial for the residents of Sheffield. And we will have to make that decision as councillors. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I think Lisa wanted to come in.
I was, and Councillor Fox has pretty much said most of what I was going to say. Actually, I was going to talk about the future leisure strategy, and that you know, we do need to look at what facility we need where for the city, and how we actually manage and operate those to make sure that we are getting the best value for the taxpayers' money. I was going to reference the 2.8 million prior to COVID as well. So I think Councillor Fox has pretty much answered the questions that I was going to put forward to answer Councillor Marouf's questions.
Thank you, Lisa. Councillor Marouf, you wanted to make another comment?
Yeah, I did. I mean, one of the comments, the answer that I haven't had yet is there any chance of SCT handing the keys back to the council? And the other question that I still don't seem to have, I don't feel I've got an answer to at the moment, is around, sorry, I have a certain amount of the answer, but I still need an observation point on this. I think Lisa mentioned that there's substantial amounts of backlog maintenance, and from my limited knowledge of buildings and plant and machinery, this could run into millions and millions of pounds. Would I be correct in thinking, Lisa, that this could be millions and millions of pounds, and this 16 million may well pale into insignificance, and we still have to take difficult decisions at the end of this?
Yeah, yes, and the 16 million, we have to remember, is a direct result of the lack of income from COVID. I can't stress that enough. You know, the budget that we'd put aside and the council had put aside to help SCT was 2.8 million, and then COVID happened and the income was wiped out overnight. So we're not, you know, I think, sorry, I can't remember who said, but we've almost had to put the brakes on everything that we were doing for the best part of 6 months now, and then restart again. So, you know, we weren't in a position where we were going to offer 16 point whatever million grant funding to SCT prior to COVID. That just wasn't part of our plan. Yes, but maintenance of these facilities that are now 30 years old will run into millions of pounds, and that, again, going back to Councillor Fox's point about the leisure strategy, is absolutely a consideration. The venues are due to be handed back to the council in 2024 anyway, as part of the original.
Sorry, Lisa. There seems to be some echoing and clattering. Is somebody not on mute? Thank you.
Okay. So yeah. The venues are due to be handed back to the council anyway in 2024 as part of the original agreement and lease agreement that was signed back in 1989. So those facilities are due to come back to the council anyway. So as part of the leisure strategy, what we're doing, again, is looking at the how, what is the best way to operate these facilities, and the options that we're talking to SCT about, and members and other people, is what is the best value for money for the council to get the best out of the facilities. The facilities will need improvements, they will need maintenance, they may need redevelopment, but these are all the options that we're looking at and hope to bring to members and publicly before Christmas, hopefully, to restart that work that we did on the leisure strategy that we had to stop in March because everything closed down. We hope to get that leisure strategy and some proposals and options out so we can all consider them, hopefully before Christmas, so we can really look at what the options are in the future, because we know that what we're doing now is not the right thing for those facilities and for the people of Sheffield. So that's what we hope the future strategy will do, is address the
Lisa, can I thank you for that candidness there, because I think in 2 or 3 years' time we're going to be faced with an issue where there's going to be multi-million pounds worth of money that needs to spend on places like Ponds Forge, and you recognise that, and maybe we might not be able to afford the money to sort this out. In terms of just on the 15 million issue, sorry, just finally, Chair, just one question. and I'll stop.
Okay.
Is any of this 15 million that we're funding being used for redundancy purposes?
Thank you. I think Eugene wanted to come in. Did you?
I think just on that question, the answer is yes, some of that will be used to help SCT fund the cost of the redundancies of the staff that have to be made redundant. But that will need to be revised now in light of the announcement today. So that is something that needs to be re-looked at. What it's the costs of operating SCT in whatever format that will take. So if that is including staff costs, maintenance costs, life cycle costs, and so on, but that will need to be looked at.
Thank you, Eugene.
Yeah, Lisa said a lot of what I was going to say, but just to reinforce, I think we've set out. I mean, we've got facilities here that Sheffield City Trust are running that have been, as Terry said, subject to 10 years of austerity, and there is a backlog maintenance. But again, to point to the leisure strategy, the work that we've got ongoing on the leisure strategy that we hope to bring forward soon, there are opportunities here, because if I point to what we're trying to do, so if we think about the facilities like Thorncliffe in the north and Graves in the south, what we have managed to do there is find a way of getting investment, which means that we've got facilities that are actually much cheaper to run. And that is part of what the strategy is about the refurbishment or rebuilding of some of our premises provides an opportunity. This is difficult because, as I've said, we're dealing with an £80 million problem, but this isn't just about the money we've spent now means that we will not be able to invest, because if we have an invest to save approach that allows us to borrow to have a cheaper facility, that is still very much, I'd like to reassure committee members, that's something very much we're actively looking at. So dealing, and as I said, we're dealing with the immediate impact. £11 million would have been the cost of this because of circumstances with COVID and the lack of government support, regardless. So we've had to deal with that, but we need to get on the front foot about what a future-based leisure strategy can look like and how we can get investment in new, better facilities that will actually be cheaper to run. I think that's the key thing for the future.
Thank you, Eugene. Councillor Hurst.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome what Eugene's just said about the leisure strategy and investors say. That's really fundamental, and I think we've got to keep a hold of that going forwards. But I want to revisit something that was said a while ago around. Can I check that I've got this right? That because the Sheffield City Trust is a trust, it wasn't allowed to apply to any of the government schemes that existed or to benefit from those schemes to support loss of income because of the COVID pandemic and the costs that it incurred through the COVID pandemic. And if that's right, can I ask the partners that are around the room, have they had a strategy? Have they been able to lobby government to actually try and reverse that? And have we seen any signs of success? Because obviously we're supporting, we're taking a lion's share of supporting the City Trust at the moment with the COVID losses. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Fox.
Thanks, Chair. And yes, Councillor Hurst is quite great. We have been meeting on a regular basis, as Eugene has said, with core cities. So as core cities, as leads of our authorities, finance leads have been meeting, and I know the leaders have been meeting as well through the core cities to look at how we coordinate a lobbying of government. The whole issue of this is that the government have chosen not to finance those leisure trusts, and that's where the issue is. At this moment in time, other authorities around this country are being financed. We are not, and that's where we're trying to get the lead. So like we've said with Manchester, we've got other core cities. And we've just come off a meeting actually with Eugene today, earlier on, where we have been pushing that point across. That obviously the impacts of COVID, the impacts of our facilities as well on the budget going forward, not also for this year, but for years going forward. And we need to have government to recognise that fact and to draw down the funding to us accordingly. As we've said previously, and I am a broken record, but after 10 years of austerity, then COVID on top of us, and no wonder that we've got into this situation where we are. As people know, I wrote a letter to the Minister in July setting out the authority's financial situation and the pressures we are facing. That can't be underplayed, how we get to that point. So to answer Councillor Hurst's real point, yes, we are lobbying, we are organised, we've got a strategy through the core cities of trying to force this point across governments now.
Thank you. Councillor Hurst, do you want to add anything?
I don't want to add anything. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Falk.
Thank you. Is Councillor Masters?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I want something clarified, please. Under the executive report, where it says under alternative options considered 5.2, it says further alternative options considered included reopening all SCT leisure facilities. This option would increase the grant required by SCT to 16.6 million and would see Ponds Forge and Westfield Sports Centre reopen. Right, and then it goes, so basically sort of that's Westfield Sports Centre is not mentioned in the report that we received today at all. It's the only time it's mentioned. I just want to know why. Is it sort of an SCT facility or not? And if it isn't, if it is one, why isn't further mention made of it? And why does the figure say the figure for opening Ponds Forge is 1.6 million. The amount for reopening Ponds Forge and Westfield Sports Centre is also 1.6 million. So is it an irrelevance? Westfield Sports Centre doesn't apply, or why? Why was it mentioned?
Can I answer?
Please.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. You're absolutely right. It is slightly confusing. The 1.6 million, so the 16.6 million refers only to Ponds Forge. There is no additional cost to the council or in terms of subsidising STC for Westfield, the Westfield School, the Westfield Sports Centre. It is an SCT facility, not a council linked facility. But what it means is that if the full grant was made available, then all SCT facilities would be open. But SCT, and I think John might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, is negotiating separately around the Westfield Sports Centre with the school, which is under a PFI contract, I think. But this is out of my area of expertise. So I'm sorry that it confused, and in hindsight it could have done with a little bit more explanation, but it is absolutely not included in the 16.6 million.
Right, and there was another point. It was Councillor Lee said earlier that sort of Ponds Forge will be open when all facilities are open, and yet Spring Leisure Centre hasn't got all facilities open either. So why is it okay for one and not the other? Because Springs, the community groups can't access the Spring facilities yet, can they?
I'm not aware of all the details of each of the facilities, and I'm not aware of all the details. So if Lisa can answer, that's great. If she's not, we'll have to get that answer to you.
Yeah, can you just tell me the question again? Sorry, Councillor Masters, I'm not sure I fully understood it. Sorry.
Right, sort of the description of Springs Leisure Centre does not make clear which facilities will be reopened. It looks as if certain ones for the general public will not be opened, right? And yet, sort of earlier today, talking about Ponds Forge, you said you would because you would open the whole of Ponds Forge rather than just the sort of the wet facilities. Did I misunderstand what you were saying?
Sorry. Okay, I understand now. It's as in most of the facilities, to be fair, it's a phased reopening because it's not been possible to reopen everything immediately, and Springs will have swimming opening. So swimming will open at Springs in the very near future. It's a phased reopening. And I believe, I don't want to put words into Councillor Lee's mouth, so she might want to answer herself, but when we were talking about Ponds Forge, there was consideration about the wet side, so the swim side, the dry side, which is the gym, and then there's the banqueting and event. So as in all the facilities, it has been a phased reopening. So swimming came back a little bit after the gyms, and so on. So I hope that answers. Springs will have swimming available, and
No, I know Springs will. I just want to make sure that Ponds Forge will be treated in the same way.
It will be a fit. Yes is the short answer, but the announcement's only been made this afternoon. There's a lot of work now with colleagues at SCT to look at what reopening Ponds Forge will look like. So I can't answer you fully, but that information will come out in the next week or so in due course when the plan is put to Cabinet on the 23rd of September about what that could look like, if that helps.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. I don't have anybody else indicate. Oh, I do. Councillor Turpin.
Thank you, Chair. I think you just kept looking down when I put my hand up. A couple of questions. What contributions have other councils made to the SCT, or are we subsidising other councils still? And can we have a full breakdown of the £15 million? And what is the future plan for the City Hall, please?
Thank you. Who's going to answer?
I can answer on the contract if you want, on the other councils if Lisa wants to pick up some of those. I think Councillor Turpin probably knows, and John may want to comment. A few years ago, SCT did win a contract with Scarborough Council, which is loss making. I think the position in the discussions we've been having with SCT is that we do not want that loss to continue and for Sheffield taxpayers to pay that. However, SCT can't just end the contract overnight, so that is part of the ongoing discussions we've got with them. Lisa?
Thank you. Lisa?
Sorry, I was just trying to answer the question in the chat as well. I think in terms of the City Hall, the plan is that the City Hall will reopen once the events come back on stream. So it's just not feasible to reopen it at the moment when we can't have major events of numbers above 30. So the plans are certainly to reopen the City Hall and Arena as soon as it's financially feasible to do so, if that helps.
Thank you.
Is it possible to share a breakdown of the £15 million at some point, please, as well?
Can you yes is the short answer. It'd be helpful to understand a little bit more about what you actually want. Do you want to see it by venue, or what kind of information you want? Maybe you can let me know, and we can certainly provide that.
Yeah, I think as much info. I was thinking about venue, but after the somebody asked a great question before about funding redundancies. I think it would be really useful to see a bit of that detail as well.
Okay.
Please. Can I also have a couple more, well, sort of another couple of questions. The report for this meeting mentions a report by SLC. So firstly, I would like to ask, will this new report still be appropriate post-epidemic? And also, can we know how much the report cost and what the terms of reference were for it? I know that you might not be able to answer this right now, and this might be, is it something that you could share with us, please?
Yeah, if you want me to, sorry if it's not clear, but the SLC report, they're the consultants working with us on the leisure strategy. So absolutely, when the leisure strategy that we're saying comes forward, their advice and input to it is fundamental to that. And yes, it's absolutely still relevant. So because it's back to what we're saying about the business cases they're working with us on, about that investment in improving the facilities that hopefully will be better for the people of Sheffield and cheaper as well. So yeah, absolutely, it's still relevant, and it'll be part of what we report back on later in the year.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, sorry, Chair. Just finally, just something that I've just wanted to add. Healy Pool is my local pool. It's not quite in my ward, but just outside it, and that hasn't been open to the public. And in the report it says it's been open for elite swimming clubs' use in relocating from Ponds Forge. So I just wondered what impact the reopening of Ponds Forge will have on Healy Baths, and I guess on other venues. Thanks.
I can answer.
Thank you.
Well, I can answer, but I can't answer Councillor Turpin because we haven't had that conversation as yet. The decision and the information regarding Ponds Forge opening will be explored in the cabinet report that we bring on the 23rd. So the impact of Healy on school swimming, on swimming for the public as well, and the clubs will be included in that report. I can't give you a full answer today, sorry.
No, fair enough. Thanks very much, Lisa. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Turpin. Councillor Richards?
Sorry, I tried the space bar version and that didn't work. It's just going back to what everybody's talking about, the repairs and maintenance that are needed. And I just wanted to remind members that last October, we were told that short-term investment in order to keep everything going had been agreed, which was about £3 million in our current budget. And that was so that we would then have some space to look at the long-term investment needed to keep everything going. So I just wanted to remind members that we were aware of it and were doing something about it. And it's not something that's just suddenly arisen now, because I don't want people to think that the council hasn't been mindful of this all the way through. I realise that COVID has come in, but we have been looking at this from the, from the word go.
You've muted yourself, Sinead.
So members ought to be aware that that has been done, and the investment needed to maintain and keep it going has been done by this administration.
Thank you. Does anybody want to add anything to that? Okay. Councillor Fox. I've got you down, Councillor Smith.
Just to reinforce that point, and Sinead was quite right in a point that it was in the budget as well to go forward. About, I think it was 3.5 million that we put in, but quite right, and that was to give us that space pre-COVID to kind of take them views of the facilities within that maintenance block. Obviously, as I keep saying, post-COVID has reset a lot of things back to zero. And obviously has delayed some of that work, but we're trying to catch up as we're going at this moment in time.
Okay, Sinead. Councillor Maroof.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me back in again. I think one of the questions that wasn't answered when I asked earlier, and this is probably directed towards the officers, is has there been any indication that SCT and the previous sort of SIV have shown any indication of handing the keys back to the authorities? Because with everything that's happening, that would be one of the options. And has that been shared with the members?
Can I answer?
Lisa, yeah.
Sorry if I didn't make it clear, Councillor Maroof. I did think I'd answered that. The keys are due to come back, for want of a better way of putting it, in 2024, and the work of the leisure strategy is absolutely looking at what the best options are between now and 2024. So we haven't had a direct conversation with Sheffield City Trust about handing the keys back, because that has all sorts of implications for the council and for the City Trust that we need to understand fully before we go down that route. There's a I want to say complex agreements and arrangements that have been in place since the venues were built, the funding agreements, the reasons that the City Trust was set up in the first place to run the facilities, and there are implications of just handing the keys back. There are financial ones, there are human resource implications, and so on. And these need to be considered before we make any decisions. I think, as as John Warner, as trustee alluded to earlier, we are working really closely together to understand what the best course of action is. So have we had a discussion about handing the keys back? No. Is that a feasible option? It's feasible. Is it something we're actually talking about directly at the moment? No, but it is something that we will consider as part of our future leisure strategy if it's the right thing to do for both parties and the facilities. Does that answer this time? Sorry, I didn't answer that.
Yeah, no, thank you, Lisa, for being so brutally honest about it, that there is that option that keys could be handed back. You're not working towards that. And unfortunately, with 2024 almost upon us in a few years' time, I think we're in the twilight of this contract anyway, aren't we? So the difficulty for me personally, just talking personally here, is when you're towards the end of the contract, this is where things start to go a little bit pear-shaped. So I hope it doesn't, for the sake of all the users of these facilities. But I'm pleased that you've been able to answer the question directly, that it is an issue that we will be talking about. Thank you. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me again.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you for letting me back in again, Chair. It's just a quick one. Following up something that Eugene said, and it may be either for Eugene or John. It sounds like if SCT can't get out of these loss-making contracts in Scarborough, by bailing out SCT, we're effectively covering those losses. So could we have an indication, please, of approximately how much SCT are losing on those Scarborough contracts? Thank you.
Can somebody answer? Or is...
Yeah, I can't answer with specific figures, but I can say that there are active discussions going on as we speak to get out of all the contracts in the Scarborough area.
I think we have to be careful what we say in a public arena about a commercial contract with another public body, but I think I said the point earlier that is absolutely, as John indicated, an active discussion that we are talking to them about in the way they approach that with that contract. Yeah.
But just to confirm, be absolutely sure about this, some of the money that we're using to subsidise SCT is going to cover losses in another local authority. Is that correct?
At the moment, yes, and that is the position we're trying to extricate ourselves from as fast as possible. Yes.
I think I know what my view of that would be, and I think everybody else's. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think everybody has come in now. Was indicated. Councillor Lodge.
Sorry, yes, just a quick one. When we're talking about Ponds Forge and looking at reopening, are we talking about it opening 7 days a week, or is this part of looking at things, whether it will be part of the week, or will it be the full week, or is this part of the conversations that will take place? I'm just wondering. I know there'll be fixed elements and fixed costs in there, but there'll be variables, won't there? So if you're not in there for 2 days a week, the lights aren't on. So I just hope those sort of things are going to be considered. I say I know there'll be fixed costs. It will cost the same to run the pool as if it's open 7 days a week or 5. But just looking at all those sort of things.
Lisa.
Yeah, we'll absolutely look at those things, Councillor Lodge, and we have done to a certain degree already. You know, wet versus dry and partly opening. So without having a crystal ball and knowing when the events can come back on and when we can have events and conferencing and banqueting there, we will do that consideration and put that in the report to cabinet members.
Thank you. I think that is everybody now. Oh, Councillor Auckland.
Right, Chair, I just want to flag up. I've got something to propose as an addition to the report recommendation when it's convenient for you to hear.
Sorry, Councillor, I did say that I wanted to come back and make a comment because I've got a recommendation as well at the start of the meeting.
Sorry, at this point, I'm just finding out that everybody's asked the questions that wanted to ask. And then I'll bring Councillor Lodging, and then Councillor Oakland. So is that everybody's asked a question? Nobody's indicating, so I'm taking that as a yes. Councillor Lodge?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and apologies, Ian. I didn't want to be looking or jumping all over things. It's I indicated early on that I think it's been.
I'll take the tip for the future. Then I'll make my proposal right at the beginning.
Mute him, Chair. Mute him.
Chair.
Mute him. I think it's been an interesting situation that we've been in. That I think a lot of us have read the report and we're prepared for this afternoon. And then and I welcome the decision that we are looking at this again, because it's something that I think we do need to look at, and to get the facility open again. I made the comments earlier about it's central for people in the city centre, and it makes sense for accessibility where people can get there from all over the city. But I think it's great that we're managing to do this in addition to the other facilities out there, and I look forward to the proposals that come through. I've worked on a bit on a recommendation that I'd like to put to the committee chair, if that's okay. It's fairly long as I've written it down, but I'll share this if people are happy with it. And it's just starting in summary, recognising the Scrutiny Board recognises problems caused by the impact of COVID-19 on the sports and leisure facilities across the city. And we recognise the work that's been undertaken by both Places Leisure and the City Trust in providing excellent sports and leisure facilities across Sheffield, and welcomes the steps taken to open facilities in a COVID-safe way. I think we should recognise the situation faced by the council and the operators of these leisure facilities has not been helped by the government's decision to differentiate between authorities that operate facilities through charitable trusts and those which operate in-house, where they're looking to reimburse lost revenue. And I think it's to the tune of about 70 pence in the pound that they were covering lost revenue. I think we need to recognise that the social impact the continued closure has across the city, both in jobs directly within the facility and across the wider economy. So it's good news that we are looking to get this reopened along with all the facilities in the right time. I think we should note that representations have already been made by Councillor Fox as a Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources, Clive Betts MPs and the other Sheffield MPs, along with officers of the Council, to the Government regarding the decision to exclude trusts from reimbursement of lost revenue. And I think we should press the Council to continue the efforts with the other authorities in a similar position to lobby for this funding to be changed and be treated in the same way. I think the situation is that if that money was provided, SIV wouldn't be, sorry, Sheffield City Trust wouldn't be in this position looking at this additional funding. So I think we should keep pressing the case there. And I think as I say, I welcome the news that the Cabinet have agreed to provide or to look to provide additional funding to enable Ponds Forge to reopen. And I think we should call on the City Trust to work with the Council to review all the costings again and giving consideration to the proposals that have been put forward by the aquatic clubs. Don't know how robust they are, but just consider it and consider the wider, as the Council view, to consider the wider economic impact of Ponds Forge and the benefits to the city. And I think finally, I'd just like to say, I think we should thank the aquatic squad for their submission and everyone who contributed in drawing that up, and the members of the public who signed the petition and expressed their concerns over the current proposals. I think it's focused everybody's minds, and I think it has been welcomed that the Council have listened, the Cabinet have been listening to what's being said, to look at this and consider the proposal again. And I think the final, but I think on a lot of these things, we make recommendations and they go there. But I think on this occasion, we should look to forward a copy of the recommendation of the board to all the city's members of parliament, and so that they can take every opportunity that's available to them to raise this matter with the appropriate government departments and the ministers, and asking that they reconsider the decision to exclude trusts from this revenue reimbursement at 70 pence in the pound, because it's, you know, there are inequalities that are happening there, and places like Sheffield and other core cities are being disadvantaged. You know, you get, putting it bluntly, you have a government that welcomes outsourcing, and Sheffield and other authorities outsourced in effect to trust, but now they turn around and say, tough, you're on your own. So I think we should send a copy of any recommendation to all the city's MPs and ask that they get involved in lobbying the government. As I say, it's quite wordy. I have got a copy if people are happy that I can send across.
Thank you, Councillor Lodge. Councillor Auckland.
Thank you, Chair. In an attempt to move things on, if I may, intended helpfully, where Councillor Lodge mentioned a bit about the City Trust and the Council working together, would he incorporate also including working with representatives of the users, such as the aquatic clubs, who have put forward proposals, hopefully not contentious? Everybody commented at the beginning about the fact that there was no executive of Sheffield City Trust available to answer questions. So I do think it's legitimate to put on record that we regret that executives of Sheffield City Trust were not in attendance to answer direct questions from members of this committee. And I hope that might be supported. The final one is, and it goes back to the previous report back in October and the audits and everything else. So in relation to SCT SIV, noting the concerning but pre-COVID financial information recently reported in private to members, this board resolves to set up a members working group to inquire into the management and control of SCT and SIV and their relationship with the council and make recommendations to Cabinet. And I think that will sit alongside the review that's underway. And to be clear, Chair, I'm not asking for something that is going to impinge on the really difficult decisions that people have to make in the current COVID crisis. But I think, and it's always awkward, I recognise it's probably awkward, but if we set up as a scrutiny board, the fact is we had real concerns about how things had panned out pre-COVID. And I heard, you know, Councillor Fox talk about the impact of austerity, and but maybe I think I'd be quite happy to say, as a scrutiny board, we should be looking for lessons learned. It's probably more wide, it's possibly lessons as well about how the council interacts with outside bodies, you know, the long list of people that we put representation on at council and what sort of support they get and whether we have the right people on there. I think it could be something that we ought to have a proper look into. So that would be, if the first few were uncontentious, hopefully, I hope the last one will be uncontentious. I talked about putting stuff about terms of reference and whether it should be the chair who decides or whatever, and whether it should be the chair and vice chair or whether it should all come back to the committee. I think putting down a marker that there should be an inquiry and recommendations made as a scrutiny inquiry is valid, and I think I'd leave the detail to be sorted out.
Well,
so I don't know whether the first bits were all right.
It's a bit harsh, inquiry. I am mindful to take on board what you're saying about for the future, looking at, you know,
I said to inquire into, not
oh, right. Oh, I
yeah.
see. Sorry. I'll
into the money.
Yeah. But, yeah, I'm mindful to listen to what others say, but I think that it would be helpful, useful to have a cross-party group from this scrutiny to look at future facilities and sports and a way forward after. I'm sure we've got some politicians here that would. I'd like to, Councillor Lodge.
Yeah, it's just to comment. Happy to incorporate the points in the Councillor Auckland there. And I think it's. I didn't quite get what he said about with the the executive members of SCT not being there, but I think, yeah, it's disappointing they weren't here. I know there are always circumstances, holidays, so it was disappointing they weren't here. So I think, yeah, that's right to include that in there. I think we have got a leisure strategy that we're working towards. And so there will be more opportunity to look at things in leisure. And I would imagine that leisure strategy would be something that could come to this board, which would look at the aspects of things going forward. As we're in that position, as being said on a number of occasions, you know, we're looking towards 2024, where things change. Is it to set a group to look at SCT on this? Would it not form part of any wider? And I don't know, I haven't heard this, but I would be sure that as we come out of COVID-19, like all such sort of incidents and things like that, you always have a review of what's been done, what's been said, could we done anything better? And I would think as part of the overall review that goes into all these things, that would be something that would be picked out, because I would think there are many different aspects of everything that's gone on in the city across the last 6 months and will continue for longer, that will come out in there. And would we be looking at, in effect, duplicating something that's going on across in a wider review? So, well, I understand what you're saying in bringing it in, but would we as a scrutiny board be using resources to do something that's carried out as part of a wider review?
Well, Mary's indicated and Deborah, so I've probably got views on that. Mary?
Well, there'll be a massive investigation into COVID the pandemic in the city and all over the country anyway, won't there? And Civ will be part of that, or SCT. I think it's appropriate to bring the review of the facilities back to this scrutiny board at an appropriate time when we've got something to bring back. I have no problem with that.
Thank you, Mary.
Chair.
Thank you. Sorry, Deborah wanted to come in.
Yeah, sorry. I think probably Councillor Lee's just said much more succinctly what I was going to advise, which is I mean, basically, rather than calling it inquiry, what you could do is a working group, task and finish group, scrutiny review, whatever you want to call it, which would look at, would set some terms of reference that members of the committee were happy with. But I would very much, agree with Councillor Lodge in the fact that what you don't want to do as a scrutiny committee is duplicate work that's already taking place. So what you could do is, I did say that Councillor Lee was more succinct than me. What you could do is have scrutiny has got a pre-decision scrutiny role. So whilst the leisure strategy is being developed and these options are being developed and decisions are being considered, you could have that scrutinised at this committee, and you could have a discussion. You could set aside more than one meeting to do it if you wanted to do, but you could kind of incorporate into and add value to the strategy, the development of the leisure strategy, rather than doing something alongside it, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Deborah. Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Chair. It's just a very short, specific request. Eugene did caution about the confidentiality of discussions around the losses in Scarborough, but I think the committee, could we ask Eugene on a confidential basis to give us a briefing or a document just outlining how much that is and how on earth we've got into the position where Sheffield taxpayers are subsidising facilities in Scarborough. And I know that's confidential, some of the contracts, so if we could have outside of this meeting a briefing on that document, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody? Eugene?
I can just follow up on that. I think it's absolutely appropriate that members of the committee have a briefing on that. I was just trying to caution about debating it in a public meeting. So yes, absolutely, we'll find a way of following that up. The other thing I'd just like to comment on, and I said it earlier about SCT attendance, given the joint working we've got with them, and I understand the concerns, if members want to log a concern about the lack of SCT executive attendance here, then I'd like you to put that at my door, because I was the intermediary on that, and I understand your concern, but if you've got a concern, then that's for me to deal with. SCT execs didn't refuse to come, so if that's something you want to put at my door, that would be what I would prefer, please. Thanks.
Okay, right. Ian, you indicated, did you want to come in?
So we've made it pretty clear how we feel about the attendance. It also goes back to the other meeting, you know, in October, when I'm sure we would have gone into it before. This is me personally. Based on what Eugene said, I don't want to attack the people who are trying to clear up the situation that we've got into here. So if we're going to get our briefing, because there's also the contract in Derby, I think that would satisfy that point. But I do think that officers should know, then Eugene should know, that we would like to probably be talking to the senior people who have got us here. And there's been a little bit of a political angle to whether it's austerity or whether it's management in this. And I guess we'd like to, somewhere along the line, we'd like to get to the bottom of how we've got to where we were before COVID struck. I take it council lodge members won't have a difficulty in the bit about involving the clubs, because they've clearly done some quite effective work in getting to where we are now. So it just comes down to the inquiry and inquire into, and I was trying to make a different point from COVID. I might struggle with this if the boot was on the other foot, but as a scrutiny exercise, there's, in the back of my mind, on my time on the council, there's the entire issue about all these bodies that we appoint people to and how they work and how it's worked in this case, and how come we haven't had an effective way, I think, could be wrong, of seeing what was coming our way irrespective of COVID. And I don't think a members working group is a particularly heavy way of dealing with that. It might even do some really useful stuff. Well, so right. I still press that upon my committee.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's two things here, Ian. There's the report coming back to the full scrutiny from the October report. That can come back. I think we really need to look at this. But your suggestion
of by a resolution of some description. If somebody's got a better way with words.
But also having a task force for the future, I think, looking at as members, you know, not as a scrutiny board, but as an arm off sort of thing. Without public there, I was looking at the future of the leisure facilities and how we, you know, what do we see and how can we help bring in our thoughts and concerns, and because of COVID, I believe that a lot of things will change. So I don't think that will be unhelpful for us to work together as a board to look at this. So if anybody disagrees, let me know, but that's my thoughts.
Okay, I can supply the words that are put, but it might want in members working groups going inquiring into past and future. I think that's what you're driving at then.
Yeah.
And future relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, so
John Turner can make sense of that, but I can send John the phraseology I've used, and I'm happy to repeat it.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, John. I was just going to say, if anybody disagrees with anything that either Ian or Brian's got to say, can they indicate before we? Yeah, I think that everybody seems to be in agreement.
If it helps, Chair, I've just posted it onto the chat.
Right. So that'll be useful. I think it might be useful for both of you to send your
I've sent it through to John, but I've put it onto the chat as well if everybody wants to read it.
Thank you.
Councillor Hurst.
Thank you, Chair. I think listening to Councillor Auckland, he's making a more general point, and the point that is made in Councillor Lodge's recommendation, motion. I think it's an overall review, which is not particularly linked to the Sheffield City Trust situation we find ourselves in, but more about a council-wide mechanism for representation and reporting back, which may not sit happily within this, but maybe a separate motion. So that's my only comment.
Okay, if members are happy to take it together, that would be great. Brian said most of what I'd got something very similar down, possibly fewer words. I'm amazed, but yeah, I'm taking the opportunity to put this other bit on. Diana Hurst, Councillor Hurst is quite correct, but take it as separate altogether. I think it is related though, and we're entitled to resolve it as we wish. It seems convenient to do it that way. If the chair's supporting it, I think hopefully we'll all agree to it.
Deborah indicated, did you want to add something?
I did, but I think we've possibly covered it now. I was just wanting to clarify whether we were actually talking about a working group or whether we were talking about attributing agenda items in future meetings towards kind of looking at this in more detail. It was just really to get a steer on that.
Well, I said that I would like the report coming back to the full scrutiny, but also for the future, a working group onto the future and past and present decisions made and what we can learn from it. Mary?
I think Terry put his hand up first. I'm not quite sure what you're asking for now. I'm happy, as I said before, that when we reach appropriate stages in the leisure services facilities review, and this will be over a long period of time. It's the programme is not going to be something that will be up and running next year or 2 years from now. There's a lot of planning will have to go in this because it looks at all our facilities. So we need to bring that back and at regular points bring that back to this scrutiny board. And as I say, we're talking over a few years. It's not just it won't be just one meeting, it won't be one presentation, it'll be over a number of years that we'll bring this back to you. That's what I can't propose, I'm just saying.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Fox.
Thanks, Jen. And it is just to clarify where members are wanting to take this. Whilst I understand the appetite to have the policy development and towards the leisure strategy, I get that, and to how the process would work, you would feed that in. As Councillor Lee says, various milestones, we bring various things to scrutiny. And I'm also kind of welcome to a lessons learned issue. I get that, but I think at this moment in time, there are a number of lessons to be learned by a number of processes as we've gone through COVID. So, to try and focus on one issue, I kind of understand that, but there are wider implications across the corporate side of the council as well. So whilst I'm open to the kind of lessons learned varies and the policy development, what I'm unsure of is where members want to take this proposal forward, because whilst there is a process to feed into that leisure strategy and to kind of put their thoughts and ideas on and shaping that. What I am concerned about is time and resources and capacity of how that may shape going forward. And also I understand members' frustrations about representatives from SCT. Totally get that point, and I'm sure that once the cabinet report comes out and goes through cabinet, I'm sure that obviously some members may want to discuss around that, and that might be appropriate time then to invite SCT representatives to future meetings. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Mary, quickly.
Oh, sorry, I'm going to suggest that the leisure review comes to this group at some point when an appropriate point, and I don't think that'd be very long off, I'm not sure yet, but we just bring that, and then you make a decision about how you want to take things forward from your perspective. In terms of looking at lessons learned, there's a million lessons learned have to be learned about everything to do with COVID, and very much the situation we're in now with SCT and the leisure centres is to do with COVID.
Yeah, thank you, Mary, for that input. I don't think, I think we're getting, my thoughts of a working group is for something for the future. So yeah, I'm happy for the review, leisure review to come here to full scrutiny. I'm looking at an handful of members from this board that would like to look at policy development for the future. That's what I'm looking at. So we're talking at cross purposes, I think. So anyhow, it's getting late now. We've been on a long time. I'm conscious of time. So we all agreed to the proposals, the recommendations that Brian and Ian's put forward. We're all happy with that. We're passing it on to John. So thank you for that.
I've sent it on to John.
Yeah, brilliant. So at this point, I can say we can dismiss the officers and the cabinet members and saying thank you very much for your attendance, and to John Warner, thank you very much for getting on and attending the meeting, and I'm not sure you'll take it back to the board for us. And I would just ask members to stay on for a few minutes longer to talk about future meetings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Right. Thank you very much, councillors. I'm looking at. I'm mindful to sort of wanting to bring this back as soon as possible, which may be November, December time, because it's popular, and we want to know what's going on. But to make sure that we've got all this SCT executive available to us, we've got to give them some time. So in the meantime, I wanted to say to you, is there anything that you in our programme that you would like to bring forward? Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Chair. I don't know whether it's in the existing programme, but clearly the economic recovery plan for Sheffield post-COVID and how as a city we're going to recover economically has got to be one of the most important things for this committee to look at. So
absolutely.
So I don't know when would be appropriate to do that, but we should certainly get sight of a draft before the end of this calendar year, I would have thought.
Yeah. Councillor Turpin?
Thank you, Chair. Can I just add to Councillor Smith's suggestion, and that a feature of that would be the effect on small local businesses, and it really does feel like we're losing quite a few, and many, I imagine, are at risk.
Agree completely.
Yeah, well, and we've got Deborah here, so she'll follow that up for us. Is there any other subject that you'd like us to put on the programme? I know we did have a work programme, but it seems to have gone out of the window now because other presidents have took over and priorities. So if there's anything you can think of, or email us afterwards, it would be useful. But in the meantime, we'll get the leisure review, the report, the October report here. It'd probably be useful to have both together if we can in one scrutiny. Deborah?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to say that yeah, the work programming process would have normally taken place during the period of kind of lockdown and the kind of pandemic period of time. What I'm proposing to do, or what all the scrutiny team are proposing to do across all of the committees, is to bring a draft work programme back to the committees. It will be based on previous areas of interest, so obviously the economic recovery would have been on there anyway, I think. The focus on the leisure strategy perhaps wouldn't have been picked up before, so that's a kind of new addition to it. So what I'll do is try to bring a draft work programme to the next meeting, and we are aiming to get these meetings up and running as regular as possible, as regular as the situation will allow us to. So I could put that on the agenda for the next meeting, include the items that have been discussed today, and then members can make any further comments at that point if they want.
Okay. Thank you for that. And the only other thing to say, Councillor Richards.
Yeah, sorry. I wanted to add to the thing about businesses, that the fact that we delivered the government's business grants and things, and today there's been a report about fraud around it, and it would be useful to know how well we did our scheme, and also whether there were any fraudulent claims in the same way they're saying that there were across the country, and what we've learned from it. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. Councillor Auckland, are you indicating?
I think to say somewhere along the line whether we're going to have a public transport system. That's something to inquire into, how it might work.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Deborah's got all these down. So well, I'll thank you very much for your attendance today. If you would like to indicate to Deborah or myself, or who would like to join us for this task and finish group for the future of the leisure industries and facilities, I'd appreciate, and me and Deborah will get together and see how that can work. Okay. So thank you very much, everyone, for your attendance today and your patience.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Bye.